Welcome to our program. Today's topic, breathing good, clean air. A metal worker at a smelting plant unloads lead ingots. A painter in a factory mixes thinner with paint. A hazmat team surveys an accident scene where hazardous gases may have been released. These situations all have something in common. The workers in each of them face potential breathing hazards. There are over 5 million workers in the United States who wear respirators on the job. Yet each year, more than 66,000 workers are affected by severe exposure to airborne contaminants that can lead to cancer and other serious illnesses. Because of the importance of breathing safe, clean air, OSHA and NIOSH have established comprehensive respiratory standards. Hi, I'm Jim Riley. To protect ourselves from breathing contaminated air, we must be aware of the respiratory hazards we face and how to avoid them. This can play a big role in keeping us healthy while we are on the job. We need to start out by being combat ready. Be aware of potential problems. Read the material safety data sheets for the substances you are working with, and follow all safety procedures. Your employer will run various tests on your work environment. These will determine whether respiratory hazards exist in a particular area. If necessary, your company will install air processing systems to filter particles from the air and set up emergency respirator stations in case there are any accidents involving contaminated air. Using engineering controls like lab hoods and other ventilation systems will also help keep the air you breathe clean. Environmental controls, like spraying water on dry, dusty surfaces, can help to hold down airborne contaminants as well. What types of respiratory hazards can we be exposed to? Well, they can be broken down into 3 groups: dust, mist, and fumes, gases and vapors, and oxygen deficiency or temperature extremes. Dust, mist, and fumes are small particles that float suspended in the air. Dust is given off as solid materials are breaking down. This occurs in cutting, crushing, and grinding operations. Mist is formed from tiny drops of liquid that hang in the air. Fumes are composed of solid particles given off during the heating of metals or plastics. Breathing in dust, mist, or fumes can irritate the linings of your throat and lungs. The second hazard group involves substances that change form into gases and vapors. Gases are often produced when chemicals are processed, especially during operations involving heat and pressure. Vapors are formed when substances evaporate. If inhaled, both gases and vapors can cause immediate irritation. The last group of respiratory hazards includes oxygen deficiency and temperature extremes. Oxygen deficiency occurs in areas where breathable air has been eaten up by a chemical reaction or fire, or where air is pushed out by another gas. If you enter these areas without a portable air supply, you can quickly pass out. If oxygen levels are low enough, it could even kill you. Trying to breathe in areas where temperatures are extreme, the air is too hot or too cold, can seriously damage your airway. Each of these types of hazards can cause us harm, so we need to think about protection. We talked some about process equipment and ventilation. Now let's look at That's right, respirators. They're available in three basic types: those that screen the air through simple filters, those that chemically purify the air, and those that supply their own source of fresh breathing air. The protection you'll need depends on the type of work you are doing. To help you determine what type of respiratory protection you should have, NIOSH has set up standards to classify respirators. These standards state that if the material in the air is oil-based, you must use a filter which has a designation that begins with the letter R for oil-resistant or the letter P for oil-proof. If there is no oil present, you can use a filter with an N for not oil-proof. Besides dealing with the presence of oil in the air, the NIOSH filter classification system also takes into account the useful life of a filter, as well as how effective it is at removing particulates from the air. The ratings that follow the letters N, R, and P will tell you the strength of each filter and are listed in percentages. They are 95, 99, and 99.97, which is referred to as 100%. The higher the percentage, the more protection the filter offers. A good example of equipment that just screens the air is the disposable filter mask. These work well against mild hazards like dust. Here, fibers in the mask trap and hold floating particles. To get a good fit, pinch the metal strip on the mask to the bridge of your nose. Discard your mask when it becomes clogged or when your work is done. More help is required in areas where chemical hazards exist. This means a respirator with disposable cartridge filters, which purify the air through a chemical process. Oil-resistant R-series filters must be changed every day, unless you can prove that the filter stays clean, keeps its shape, and is easy to breathe through for more than one shift. If there is no oil present on the job site, then an N-series filter can be worn until it becomes dirty, damaged, or hard to breathe through. Oil-proof P-series filters can be used until they become dirty, have lost their shape, or are difficult to breathe through. Even if you have the right class, your respirator will not adequately protect you unless you're using the right filter for the substance you are working with. Unfortunately, the more protection the filter offers, the harder it is to breathe through. So don't use a filter that is rated higher than you need unless it is recommended by your supervisor. To help you make sure you are using the correct type of protection for the substance you are working with, OSHA requires that all filters and cartridges be color-coded and labeled with NIOSH-approved labels. Once you have chosen the correct filter cartridge, you can extend its life as well as provide more protection by adding a pre-filter. This will help capture floating particles before they can clog the cartridge. Sometimes you need even more protection than a respirator that only covers your mouth and nose can provide. That is when you should look at using other models, such as those with a full face mask. A full face mask becomes important if you work around hazards that could also irritate the skin and eyes. Cartridge respirators are not effective when there is not enough breathable oxygen in the work area or when there are too many hazardous substances in the air for the respirator to filter. In these cases, a supplied air respirator, or SAR, must be used. These are attached to a compressor that provides air through a hose. A self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBA, eliminates the need for a long connective hose by putting the air supply on your back. This makes it much easier to move around while you are working. If you are using an SCBA, check with your supervisor to see how long your tank's air supply will last. Remember that the average time shown on the charts will be affected by your weight and how hard you'll be exerting yourself. Make sure beforehand that the tank is fully charged. You don't want to run out of air in a tight situation. If you are wearing an SAR or even an SCBA, keep your hoses untangled. And remember to watch your air supply gauge. Whether your job requires you to wear SCBAs, cartridge respirators, or dust masks, OSHA mandates that a written respiratory plan, which outlines the respiratory requirements of your job, be readily accessible to anyone at your work site. Your employer will periodically review these requirements to ensure that all the procedures and equipment used in your job are up to date with current regulations. Before you even begin working in an area where respirators are required, your employer must arrange a medical evaluation to determine whether you can safely wear a respirator while on the job. This evaluation will be conducted by a licensed healthcare professional. Once you have been cleared to use a respirator, you will need to find one that you can wear comfortably. Your employer will have at least 3 different sizes to choose from. You want to make sure to select one with a good fit. Standing in front of a mirror can help you judge what kind of fit you have. First, have your supervisor help you to correctly position the respirator's mask over your face. Then, adjust the straps to hold the mask in place. The straps should be snug enough to hold the mask in place without feeling uncomfortably tight. The mask should also be comfortable without being loose enough to slide around. If the mask is too loose, hazardous substances can leak in. Once the respirator is firmly in place, check to see if you have room to talk. Your supervisor will give you something to read aloud to make sure people can understand you while you are wearing the respirator. Never remove your mask in order to be understood. After you are comfortable and feel you have a good seal, you need to check to see how effective a fit you really have. This can be done in 2 different ways. Qualitative testing is performed by spraying an irritant smoke or saccharin in the air. If the odor can't be detected inside the facepiece, you have a good fit. This test is somewhat subjective, though, because it relies on each person's sense of smell. A more accurate assessment can be achieved through quantitative testing. Here, a special machine is used to measure the exact amount of material that gets past your respirator. To make sure your respirator keeps its fit, you should perform both positive and negative pressure tests each time you put it on. For the positive test, cover the respirator's exhalation valve with the palm of your hand and gently breathe outward. You probably have a good fit if you feel the pressure build up beneath the mask and see the sides of the facepiece bulge. For the negative test, close the inhalation valves and breathe in gently. Here, the facepiece should collapse against your nose. Hold your breath for 10 seconds. If the mask stays collapsed, you have a good fit. Your respirator should also be checked out at least twice a year for damage and a proper fit. These tests help make sure your respirator is in good working condition. In order to be sure it is working properly, OSHA also requires that all employees who wear respirators undergo periodic medical evaluations. It's important to remember that changes to your head or face can affect how your respirator fits as well. Remember that something as simple as a pair of glasses can interfere with the seal and make your mask ineffective. In fact, some masks cannot be worn with any type of eye protection. It is usually possible, however, to modify these masks to allow you to wear eyeglasses. Once these modifications are made, the entire respirator must be recertified for your protection. The threat of a bad seal is also the reason you may not be allowed to wear a respirator if you have any facial hair, including long sideburns. Air interferes with the faceplate seal and can cause breaks to occur. Other things that can affect the seal are scars and other physical impairments, as well as changes in the structure of your face caused by dentures or extreme variations in weight. Notify your supervisor about any of these problems before you begin working with a respirator. Even with a good fit, a respirator can feel bulky and awkward, so you should practice working in it. Now that you know how to fit yourself with a respirator, you need to know how to clean it. Your employer will supply you with the material and information you need to help you follow the OSHA regulations on cleaning and disinfecting. You can also use the procedures recommended by the manufacturer, as long as they are at least as effective as the methods specified by OSHA. OSHA's respirator cleaning and disinfecting procedure is as follows. First, remove any filters, cartridges, or canisters. Disassemble the facepiece and pressure test all valve assemblies and hoses. Be sure to repair or replace any defective pieces as soon as you discover them. Wash all the pieces in warm water using a detergent that is recommended by the manufacturer. A stiff bristle brush can be used to help remove dirt, but don't use a wire brush. This can damage the respirator and diminish its ability to protect you. Rinse all the components thoroughly in warm water. Running water is the most effective way to remove any detergent residue that has accumulated on the respirator. Removing this residue is important in preserving the life of your respirator. Otherwise, it can deteriorate the rubber and corrode the metal. You don't want this to happen to the tool that protects you throughout your workday. Hand dry the pieces with a lint-free cloth, then reassemble and test the respirator to make sure it is working properly. Respirators that are only worn by one person should be cleaned and disinfected as often as necessary to keep them sanitary. If 2 or more people share a respirator, it should be cleaned and disinfected after each use. Emergency and training respirators should also be cleaned and disinfected after each use. After you have cleaned your respirator, store it in a plastic bag in a safe, dry space. Remember, if you work with materials like asbestos or lead, you may need to use more involved cleaning procedures. Consult your supervisor if you have any questions. Take care of your respirator, and it will take care of you. Let's recap what we've learned about respiratory protection. Be aware of possible respiratory problems like dusts, gases, and temperature extremes. Follow correct safety procedures, including the NIOSH guidelines for filter use. Read material safety data sheets and be on the lookout for respiratory hazards. Use ventilation equipment and environmental controls to help keep the air free of contaminants. Use respirators when necessary. Make sure you have the appropriate filter for the job you are doing. Get yourself fit tested. A respirator is a useless tool if it does not seal to your face and block out contaminated air. Maintain your equipment. Disinfecting it and storing it properly will keep it in top working order. Play it safe. Don't become a statistic. Always use respirators in hazardous situations because we are what we breathe.